I built this patio in my backyard 3 years ago to replace a patio that was accumulating water along the side of my house. I built the new patio so that it was sloped away from the house and towards the edges of the patio. And now, water no longer accumulates by the side of my house. However, in heavy rains, there are times when water accumulates temporarily around the edges of my patio.
So it has been raining all week, and even though it's not raining that hard right now, because it's been raining all week and the soil is wet, you can see that there is water accumulation right on the edges of the patio. So the patio is taking the water and it's putting it to the edges here, but the soil isn't able to sop it up as fast as the water is coming down.
So what I want to do is build some drainage around the edges of my patio to help take care of this issue. My situation isn't that bad and the water buildup will dissipate after a couple hours when it does build up. The style of drainage that I want to install is a French drain. A French drain is a setup that includes a trench that is dug down approximately 18 inches deep and 12 inches wide. A special cloth allows water through it and is sometimes used to line the trench. Then a couple inches of stone are added, and then a drain pipe, and then the rest of the trench is filled up with stone, and topped off with a thin layer of turf so you don't even see it. The drain pipe is typically sloped so that the water will flow down with gravity to the area you want the water to go. I built the patio so that it's sloped towards the sides, so this is where I'll add my French drain. Once water is in the French drain, it will need to go somewhere. Ideally, I should take the water and divert it into the street where it can then drain into the city drainage. This will mean a lot of digging so that the pipes can reach to the street. Another thing that I could do is dig a deep well, fill it with stones, and divert the water into the stone well. This typically doesn't work as good, and I could end up with the same issue if it doesn't hold enough water. But this is something that I am considering since my issue is pretty minor. But I would also hate to do all this work with little to no improvement if it doesn't work. So the plan is to just bite the bullet and dig the extra length of trenching all the way to the street. The low point of my patio is the corner furthest from the house, so it'll be from this corner that I ideally would take the water to the street. This will mean that I will need to order 80 feet of drain pipe in addition to the pipe for the French drain. In my case, the dimensions of the patio that the drain will be running parallel to are 18 by 23 feet, so a 50-foot length of pipe should cover the patio. The first pipe that I ordered was 50 feet of flex drain. Flex drain is a pipe that starts compressed, but then can flex out to its 50-foot length. It is a bit cheaper than solid drain pipe, but it isn't as strong. I only expect foot traffic on top, so this should work fine. I also figure I will need some joint pieces to connect up the lines. With the drain project roughly planned out, I can move on to starting the build. The very first step before any digging project is to have the area marked for utilities. Once everything is marked, we can start digging. I know my patio has edge restraints keeping the stones in place on the sides, so I'm going to start my digging after where the edge restraints should end. I started first by cutting the grass out into turf squares and placing them on tarps, so that I can reuse the sod and place it back on top when I'm done. After the sod is removed, I can begin digging out my trench. I start digging on the high end of the patio and work my way down. As I start my digging, I find some of the overlap material from my patio build. I found our paver base panel underneath the overhang, and since this is where I want to put the French drain, I'm going to have to cut out this overhang. I'm just going to use a utility knife, go around the entire length. With that cut out, I can start digging my trench for the French drain. I shovel the dirt directly into my wheelbarrow. I found that the easiest way to dig the trench for the French drain was to dig backwards. After a shovelful goes into the wheelbarrow, I then place the shovel a couple inches behind the last section and repeat the process. I then use a small tiller rake to scoop up the loose debris. There were a few spots where I needed to dig around some utility wires. I actually think that these no longer get used, but to be safe, I hand dug with a small spade. As I was digging my trench, I found something that would completely change my plan for this French drain. So as I was digging my trench, I found some gravel
and a drainage pipe. It looks like it's right underneath there that already takes the water to somewhere out where it's supposed to. So I think I'm just going to tap into this one.
Instead of digging all the way out to the road, I'm going to trust that wherever this original one discharges to is working and is the proper place to discharge. I'm admittedly taking a chance here because I can't find the discharge port. Maybe it taps directly into a sewer or drainage line, or maybe it's hidden somewhere within some plants, or maybe it's so old that it just isn't working anymore. But it will save me so much digging if this works that I'm going to risk it and tap into the drain here. After all, my issue isn't that bad to begin with. All I want is for the drainage to happen a bit quicker. But as a backup, I'm also going to plan to add a small overflow, so if it turns out that the pipe that I'm tapping into doesn't drain well, that I can at least dump the water somewhere else. One thing that you may be wondering is, if there was already a French drain in place, why are you having any issues at all? I think the issue is that when I expanded my patio, I unwittingly expanded it over this existing French drain, which blocked and slowed down the way it functioned. To tap into this existing French drain, I'm going to use a Y connector, cut out part of the existing pipe, and insert the Y connector into the pipe. I now have a place that I can input the water from the new drain that I'm building now. I need to make sure that this Y connector is the lowest point of my drain so that all the water flows into it and away from the patio area. It's at this point that I decide to quickly dry fit my pipe now that the trench is fully dug out. It was at this point that I felt I was ready to add fabric down to the drain trench. I've seen arguments online on whether you should use fabric when doing a French drain. Some people say that it's necessary to prevent stones from getting clogged up with soil. Some say to go without it because it can block or slow down the water flow. I decided to use a fabric, but I tested my fabric to make sure that water would easily pass through it. And it appeared to pass through rather quickly, so I felt okay about it. I used a product called Scott's Commercial Landscaping Fabric. After I laid my fabric down across my trench, I added some gravel to the bottom to be my base. With the trench dug, the fabric in place, and the stones at the bottom, I could start to place my drain pipe. I also picked the area that seemed to collect the most surface water in heavy rains and placed my catch basin here to collect any surface water. To install it, I need to cut the pipe and attach it to each end. I want water from both sides of my patio to flow down to the corner, so I will be adding a T-joint to direct the water from both of these flows into the wide joint I just added. I'm going to add one more T-joint to connect the overflow that will take water away if water levels get really high. With all these joints planned out, I now just need to install them all. A pro can connect these joints with no issue at all, but I struggled a bit. One tip that I used is something that I learned off of YouTube, and that was to use existing drain pipe cut up and compressed as fittings to connect two different pipes. I also decided to add some screws to be extra sure that my joints would hold. I drilled holes in the pipes and added screws to connect everything together.
Okay, so we got our connections all hooked up, and the pipes listed inside this trench. Not inside this trench yet because I need to weave it underneath some of these utility cables that I found. There's a cable right there, two more cables over here that I'm going to have to slip the pipe underneath. But after I get that, I should be able to start adding gravel. And just so you can see what the system's like, it's going to start over there with a drainage pipe. It's going to lead to this catch basin, and it's going to lead to this T, which is going to tap into the existing French drain. And then I have this T over here, and this T is going to, on one end, pull the water down from this side. And on the other end, I don't even know if this is going to work out, but I put an excess cap, so if it starts overflowing, it can go over there.
I then worked the fabric and pipe around the utility cable so I could continue with the build, but being new to this, there were some mistakes that I made along the way. One of the mistakes I made was placing too much base stone to the bottom of parts of the drain, so I had to remove the base stone and reset the pipe on top of it again. Another issue I ran into once I got my pipe in place and dumped stones on top, many of the stones got around the lightweight flex drain pipe I was using and was actually lifting the pipe higher. I later learned that even when the pros use heavier duty pipe when building French drains, that they often have someone stand on the pipe to make sure the stones don't move the pipe out of place like is happening with me. With only one person working on this, I don't have anyone to stand on the pipe, and my lightweight flex pipe probably wouldn't be able to handle that type of weight anyway. But what I found I could do was use a hand tamp to hold the pipe in place and then pour my stone in. Once I got into a groove, I was able to fill a section, then fold over the extra fabric over top the stones. The pros call this burrito wrapping the drain, and continued down the drain. Eventually I got to the section where I placed my catch basin. I didn't end up fully wrapping this area all the way with fabric, but then continued on the other side of the drain. Once I was done filling in the stone and wrapping over the fabric, I came back with a tamper and tamped down the gravel a bit. I then came back with a little bit more gravel to place on top of the weed barrier in any areas that looked low. Ideally, I would have been able to do this within the fabric, but I noticed a few low areas after I already folded up the weed barrier, so I figured I could put some on top as well. Now I can put back the grass sod that I cut out and put to the side. Even though I did my best to try to even things out and make sure everything was as level as it was before, I had some spots that were low and some spots that were high. So in any area that was a bit low, I placed one of the thickly cut sod pieces. But in areas that were already getting high, I figured it would be more time efficient to just fill those areas in with dirt, because I can get the customized amount of dirt I want to make those areas perfectly level. But since I'm filling in some of the areas with dirt, and only some of the areas are getting a chunk of sod placed on them, it meant that I had some extra sod available. I decided to put it on the front lawn with a sign next to it saying free sod, and placed an ad in Facebook Marketplace that night, and the sod was gone before sunup the next day. But since I used dirt to fill in some of the areas, it meant that I will need to seed the dirt areas so they can grow some new grass. This was pretty simple. At the end of the build, I also filled in the overflow area with a bunch of gravel. I sort of just dug out a dome-shaped hole in this area and filled it in with a bunch of gravel. Though a true dry well should be a bit deeper, and often includes a perforated can to hold the gravel. But I'm figuring most of the water should follow the direction of the original drain that I tapped into, and this overflow is just a backup if the water builds up really quickly, so I didn't put too much effort into this. Added some mulch over top of the makeshift dry well so it would look decent, and was all but done. Unfortunately, I noticed another little mistake that I would need to fix. The catch basin should be lower than the ground to efficiently collect the groundwater. But I placed too much gravel underneath the catch basin, so I'll need to dig it out and remove some of the gravel under it, so that the catch basin is the lowest spot on the surface. With this fixed, I can finally call this project done. The only thing I need to do is wait for it to rain and see how it performs. A couple weeks later, my area had 4 days of rain in a row, and a flood warning issued. The rain did come down, but the French drain did its job. It prevented any water from pooling up, even though it was really wet. Take a look at some of the areas away from the French drain. I want to take a minute to talk about how much this project cost me altogether. Altogether, I spent $261.38 on the materials for this project. I also didn't have to pay for the geofabric since that was something that I already had, but if I had needed to get a roll of that, you can expect another $50 or so on top of that. The most expensive thing for me to get was the gravel. I got 30 bags of the cheap pea gravel at Home Depot for $125. But I also could have gotten 3 cubic yards of number 57 stone delivered to my house for just under $200. That would have been over 5 times the material for just a little bit more. But I wanted to avoid having to deal with any leftover material, and I actually saved money, even if I did have to load all the material into my truck myself. I do think, though, that I may have been better off spending a bit more on a larger stone. I have since read that larger stones can be better for drainage than the smaller pea gravel. Even though the pea gravel is rated for drainage and has worked great for me so far, if I were doing it again, I may have spent the extra $30 for a larger stone. One thing I found interesting is that I didn't need to use nearly as much gravel as I was expecting. According to a drainage calculator I used, it estimated that I would need 28 square feet of gravel for the project. But I only bought 15 square feet of gravel, and it was all that I needed. 15 square feet of pea gravel just happened to be at the weight limit that my truck could carry in one trip. Overall, I spent 1 weekend to do this project and maybe a total of 15 total hours. I would have taken more time if I needed to dig all the way out to the street, and probably would have needed to spend an extra $100. Luckily for me, I found an existing drain pipe near my low point and was able to tap into it. But I figure I would have needed an additional day if I did not find this. And after only 1 month of growth from the grass seed, you can't tell that there was any digging done to the area. Hopefully this video helps you if you find yourself in a similar situation. If so, consider giving this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel and I appreciate the gesture. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. I have upcoming videos about cleaning off a patio, and a follow-up video to see how the patio I built myself has held up over the past 3 years. Thank you, and enjoy.